This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We call this little discussion here the Middle East and North African Roundup. We've talked about Libya in particular quite a bit. We talked about Egypt in the past. I want to talk about the whole package that's unfolding there. As you know, the Middle East is on fire, North Africa is on fire. We decided to intervene in Libya with American Tomahawk cruise missiles. We got the Europeans and NATO to then take over. Now we have gone back in with armed drones to try and take out targets. And yet the Libyan government and Muammar Gaddafi are still in power. The Libyan military forces seem to be advancing and fighting the uprising as much as they ever did. And so I see a stalemate. I see a lot of recrimination beginning about what the end game is. What do we want to see coming out of Libya? Do we want Gaddafi dead? Do we want him to leave? Do we want him to basically concede and begin to democratize this country? What is it that we're doing in Libya? And I think people are a little disturbed that no one seems to know exactly what. In the meantime, things are really erupting in a very dramatic way in Syria. The government of Syria has cracked down on demonstrators, and not only cracked down but actually massacred people. The military has been out actively using tanks and the armed forces, shooting people, snipers, killing people. And it is, in some respects at least, as bad, maybe worse than the situation in Libya. More casualties and a more direct affront by the government to any international human rights agenda or human rights protocols. And yet on that one, the United States has barely said anything. There is not much going on, no movement, and certainly the United States is not interested apparently in using any kind of military force. We've said that we will impose some more trade sanctions on Syria if they continue down this route, but from everything that I see, Syria already has trade sanctions on it apparently, and a few more sanctions are not going to make much of a difference. The interesting thing is, and this is fascinating, even though the Syrian government, is a pretty harsh government, a country like Israel, which sits right on the border of Syria, is very worried that the Syrian government may fall, something else may come into power that is worse than even this very abusive government that has virtually no human rights and doesn't respect the opposition. That brings into play a third country in North Africa, and that is Egypt. And of course you know that Egypt and Israel have a peace treaty and a peace accord. They have had no conflict between them and have cooperated on certain things at a level that is unheard of between an Arab country and Israel. The latest is that now that the government of Egypt has basically changed hands, that President Mubarak is now under investigation, is no longer the head of state, that Egypt is beginning to move away from the peace process, that it is not very popular with the people of Egypt, and that the current government is actually now beginning to reach out to countries that are sworn enemies of Israel, such as Iran, and that is a daunting and a frightening development, because if we return to the period before the Arab-Israeli peace agreement, the Egypt-Israel peace agreement, I think we are reopening the window to another Middle East confrontation between Israel and whoever stays in power in Egypt, and that would be a disaster. We had many wars before between those countries, and it would be a huge reversal to go back to a previous history. But it just shows you that even a bad government like Mubarak's, in the end, at least it's a devil that you know, and a lot of people have said that we don't know what's going to succeed in the long run, the government of Egypt. We don't know what's going to succeed Gaddafi's government in Libya either. It could be much worse than Gaddafi. It could be a very unstable coalition. It could include radical Islamic groups and others. And apparently Israel is extremely concerned about all these developments, and the United States, in essence, at least in my opinion, is flying without a flight plan, if you want to use a metaphor, or is navigating without a chart, if you want to use a sailing analogy. I think that we are sort of ad hocing it, that we are taking situations one at a time and trying to sort of figure out what to do about them. We have no comprehensive philosophy about what should happen in that part of the world, really. Of course, the ideal is to have democratic governments with elections and political parties and freedom of the press, something which most people think is most unlikely and is a fantasy scenario that is just not going to happen in those countries, because they have very little tradition of that sort. They have a tradition of authoritarianism. So the Middle East and North Africa continue to be a tremendously inflamed and dangerous part of the world. And here with you folks at InsiderIowa.com, we watch that with a great deal of apprehension, I think, and we'll revisit it when necessary. This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.